Father, Son, and Violin. Chapter 11, the first high climax of the story. 1. My maiden sex experience. Any Chinese man or woman who has gone through the 60s would experience the headache of onerous household chores. For example, cooking rice. There was no electric rice cooker or gas at that time, therefore we all had to make a coal fire. To make a coal fire, we had to go to the coal station to buy loose coal. To buy coal we needed to borrow a flatbed cart, a Chinese man-powered trailer. After we got the loose coal back home, we had to make briquettes. Later it evolved into making honeycomb briquettes. It was called ome, meaning lotus root coal. Just dealing with the coal formed a chain business. Also, since we had never even heard of the word refrigerator, very often we needed to go to the food market. And as we had no washing machine, every item of clothing was dependent upon our hand brush. Talking about washing clothes, I still remember that feeling, the feeling of acute pain from my carrot-like little fingers in the ice-cold water. They felt as though they were being pricked by millions of needles. In addition, mending clothes and other chores that were supposedly women's specialties, us brothers got to do ourselves. As the only woman in our family, our mother had to go out to win the bread, to win the rice, for us. There is something that needs to be clarified here. Our family was not an exception. Almost all kids my age had to do slave labor to help the family. I am here and rambling today not to blame my mother, nor the age. If there is something I could blame, anything at all, it would be that my mother made me in the wrong place or at the wrong time. I'm just trying to impart that as a 14-year-old juvenile, after school, housework, and playing the violin, there was little time left for playing with other kids or childish pursuits. However, up till then, with effort, I somehow managed to keep the balance. Since I had gotten to know Jiang Langsha, things started to change radically, as from him, I could endlessly borrow books. Works of Western classical literature, books like Notre Dame de Paris, Red and Black, War and Peace, Anna Karenina, Spartacus, Romeo and Juliet, and so on. Among the piles of books, my most favorite, or as my father would say, the book that poisoned me the most, was a Jean Christophe by Romain Rolland. Though it is a very thick book, especially to a 14-year boy, I read it again and again. And I was so much absorbed by the book that sometimes I would imagine I myself was John Christopher. Quite a few times I burned the rice while in my ivory tower with those books. At times I would keep reciting some of the most fascinating quotations when my mom slapped me in my face. In return for Zhang's generosity in lending the books to me, I played violin every evening outside his hut near the railway.
"That's my mental food and emotional nourishment,"
he said. In addition to reading the books, there was another good thing worth consuming time, eavesdropping on music from a radio station, the Voice of America. As I had no shortwave radio set, I would go to a classmate named Ho Kujin's home to do that. Ho Kujin was from a comparatively well-off family and had gotten a red light shortwave radio as a birthday present. For the sake of listening to the radio, we were once quite close. Since the Voice of America was regarded as an enemy station and to eavesdrop on it was a serious crime, we usually had to wait until very late at night and then hide in his room covered with a quilt while listening at a minimum volume. One night we caught an unknown station broadcasting a violin concerto. That caused me to miss the last bus, so I had to go home by the number 11 bus, my own 2 feet. During my 3-kilometer journey home, the rain began to pour down. Recalling the magnificent violin music from the radio, I was literally singing in the rain. When I finally reached home, I was completely soaked through, but was gratified that I could change my clothes and hit my pillow at last. However, no matter how hard I knocked, Mother refused to open the door. I went around to the back door hoping my brother Danson would show his mercy, but heard Mother shouting at him.
"Dare you to open it, you go out together with him."
Left with no choice, I trembled to the railway hut. More strangely, on that night my buddy Jiang Langsha too ignored my knocking on his door. I was so sure he was inside, as I knew he had to switch the railway several times during the night. His rejection gave me no alternative but to sit outside of his hut dozing. Not knowing how long had passed, Jiang's door opened. Jiang walked out with a raincoat. Not expecting to see me, he was surprised.
You are still here.
I yelled at him.
What kind of friend are you?
I stood up and headed straight into his hut. Jiang tried to stop me.
Don't.
But it was too late, as I had already separated myself from my wet clothes. There was no electricity inside. A faint kerosene lamplight danced with the breeze. I heard the train, hong hong, hong hong. I was so cold that I couldn't wait for the train to pass. I buried myself in the quilt on his little wooden bed.
Ari, my mom.
A sharp outcry, a woman's outcry, was heard, followed by a woman's nude buttocks out of the other side of the quilt. With enormous surprise, I quickly held a corner of the quilt tightly to cover my boy's thing. The opposing party, too, held the other corner of the quilt tightly to cover her girl's part. However, her other two upper parts were revealed, flickering with the rocking lamplight. Meanwhile, Jiang finished his rail switching and returned back to the hut. Seeing the scene, he couldn't help laughing out. Quickly he controlled himself and introduced us to each other. To me he said,
My sister Chu Xiaolin. In fact, I wanted you to meet a long time ago.
And to her,
This is my friend Chen Danju. He is the one people call Nine Brother, the violin genius that you said you wanted to meet.
To us he said,
Now you two have met each other, totally, completely, and with no reservation.
Soon after the introduction he burst out laughing again. Probably feeling inappropriate, he controlled his laughter and added,
I don't know what to do. You two figure it out yourselves what's best for both of you.
He took off his raincoat and wrapped himself in his army overcoat and lay on his wooden armchair sleeping. We refused to budge for a little while. I told her that all my clothes were wet.
Mine too, not dry yet.
She replied.
I see.
I puzzled. With no choice, I said,
Okay, I go. Please turn your face around.
Actually, I don't think I need much space.
She said, in a tone of commiseration. She rolled her body up with a small part of the quilt and turned her back to me. I was really cold and tired, and not yet at the age of needing to pretend to be a gentleman, so I also wrapped my body with a corner of the quilt and went to sleep, together with her feet. When I woke up next morning, I saw no Jiang Langsha but found myself naked in bed holding a nude girl in my arms. That was the first time I was ever in touch with the opposite sex, physically. I subconsciously released her with astonishment. However, the curiosity and vague longing for a woman made me, a boy in his adolescence, embrace her again, carefully and softly. Her skin was very elastic, though not particularly smooth. Meanwhile, I felt a baby bamboo growing rapidly between my legs. That getting longer, thicker and harder mysterious little bamboo shoot, pushed against Chu Xiaolin's thigh. Yet at the same time I felt extreme pain as my little banana was not ripe yet, therefore the skin was still not peeled. Suddenly, my whole body was soused like inhaling opium. Chu Xiaolin turned her body, accidentally or not, she touched the extension between my legs and seemed amused. When I realized that she was not really sleeping, I was scared off the bed, looking everywhere for my life-saving pants. I returned back home with my half-dry, half-wet clothes, but no one was home. That meant I still could not get into my room. Seeing me running circles to fight the cold, our back door opened. The next-door neighbor who Mimi said to me, "Hurry up and change your clothes, otherwise you'll be just like me and catch a cold, unable to go to school." I entered the shared kitchen but was still unable to get into my room. I had to ask her to stay in the kitchen while I stripped myself nude inside her quilt and then asked her to take my clothes away to dry in the kitchen. Mimi was of course very pleased to do that for me, in return for my favor once upon a time. Remembering back when I helped her after she was abused by her parents and left almost naked in the kitchen, I let her in to warm herself in my bed. I waited in Mimi's bed, chewing the cud of the taste of holding Xiaolin's naked body. It didn't help that Mimi's quilt gushed with the smell of a woman. All of this put me in a state of sexual impulse. I was somewhat befuddled, feeling as if Mimi walked to me, uncovered my quilt, her quilt I mean, and held my life-maker-to-be. My whole body suddenly cramped. Wah! I woke up with a throb of excitement and great pain at the same time, feeling moist in my leg junction. With my twitching body I immediately uncovered the quilt and found the moisture was not caused by urine, neither blood. It was a sticky jelly-like or bean curd-like something that I had never seen before. I burst out crying. Mimi heard me and quickly came in from the kitchen asking me what was wrong. I hurriedly covered my boy's little thing, by then a middle-sized thing, with the quilt, and answered,
There is no use to ask. My vitality of life is gone and I will die soon.
Mimi didn't get what nonsense I was talking about. After she pushed me repeatedly, I again explained, my marrow, my bone pith has come out and I won't be able to live for very long. I showed the part of wetted quilt to her. Mimi saw it, also unable to figure out what that could be, my snivel, perhaps. Anyway, she went to fetch a few pages of yellow toilet paper. At that time, Chinese toilet paper was called yellow straw paper, and wiped her quilt as hard as she could. Seeing I was shocked and ashamed, she covered my boy part with the last yellow paper and urged me,
Wipe yourself quickly and get out of here. By noon my elder brother will come back, and if he sees you here he will be very angry with me.
That was my maiden ejaculation. My first sexual experience. Here I have to give a few lines talking about this matter. At that time in China, anything to do with sex was an absolute taboo. No one talked about it. Therefore, regarding the knowledge of sex there was no information available. The whole nation was sex blind. I remember we had a female dog. When the dog grew old enough, it started to have its period. The blood could be seen from its back. We brothers were so upset and sure that one of the neighbors was responsible for the injury to our dog. No adults, not our mother, not the parents of that neighbor boy, told us anything about it. So the quarrel between us and our neighbor went on periodically. My first foreplay education was given to me by my Japanese girlfriend after I went to Australia at more than 30 years of age. Therefore, there will be more stories regarding how naive I was when it came to sex in later chapters. Now I bring our story back to what happened with me and them. After all of this, from time to time I met Chu Xiaolin at Zhang's little hut. Perhaps I wanted to meet her. Occasionally I caught them doing things together. No need to mention how stimulating, yet painful, as my little banana was still green and the skin could not be peeled. Every time I became aroused it would cause great pain. It was to overhear their caterwaul outside the door. One day, I overheard not their caterwaul but an argument. The voices were getting higher and louder, and Chu Xiaolin rushed out of the hut. I stood there without knowing what to do. Jiang waved at me and I walked into his little castle. Jiang sat there with soured cheeks. He covered his eyes with his hands and kept silent for quite a while. Just when I started to wonder whether I should go away he suddenly stood, wildly grabbed me and put me down on his bed. I was shocked by his unexpected action and lost my faculty of reaction. Before I tried to get away, he pressed me onto the bed with my face down and frantically pulled down my pants. I struggled desperately, like a fish out of water. Yet no matter how hard I floundered, as a teenager I was not at all an opponent of his. I felt something hard penetrating inside my back hole. The indescribable pain caused me to cry out miserably. I took a Shakespeare from his bed and pounded over my head. Jiang immediately let me loose, covered his right eye with his hands and screamed madly. I seized the opportunity to lift my pants up, and enduring the back pain, I escaped as quickly as I could. Back home, I ran to the kitchen looking for Mimi. As we were the only two left in our homes, I dragged her to my bed with her face down and recklessly took her pants off. Mimi, too, was puzzled at first. But when she realized what I was trying to do, she tried to resist, though not as much as I did, but with an excuse.
The rice is going to be burned.
I was too excited to care for the rice. However, when I fixed my eyes on her ass, I was more aghast than she was. I did exactly what Jiang did to me, to Mimi, but only less than half, and we both screamed from pain. Mimi turned her body, and facing me, took the chance to get away from the bed. Obviously, same as we tried to steal the green banana together when we were around 10, as boy less than 15, my little banana was not ready to be peeled, and in her wrong place it was for sure painful. But to me that was the right place, as Jiang taught by doing it to me. It took quite a few years before I came to know that human common knowledge. Two, the story of Jiang Longsha and Chu Xiaolin. Henceforth, I dared not see Jiang Langsha again. Even when I needed to go somewhere, I made a detour to bypass his hut. It was okay for me not to see Jiang, yet it was not okay not to read books. That put me in a constant state of anxiety, acting like a fly without a head. One day, I bumped into Chu Xiaolin by chance. Maybe I shouldn't say by chance, as she was apparently standing there waiting for me. Although she was only 2 years older than me, she acted like a little aunt, taking me to the Xiangjiang riverbank and telling me the story about her and Jiang. Chu Xiaolin's father was a man in favor of boys, a Chinese thinking of men are superior to women, yet, the mother's hemorrhage during the birth of Xiaolin cursed her body, leaving her half paralyzed and living in a wheelchair. That brought her father's boy dream to a dead end. Hence they decided to recruit a homestay son-in-law when Xiaolin was a little toddler. This explains why the parents joyfully accepted Jiang as their adopted son when he was a primary school kid. Jiang and Chu got along quite well with each other as brother and sister and had not the slightest idea what their parents' plan was, until the day Jiang had to go to the countryside, to the so-called vast world. Their father started to worry that Jiang would be gone forever. Thus the father laid all his cards on the table. The father handed Jiang a white towel and locked the two up in their room, ordering,
"You two will not be let out until the assignment is accomplished. No red on the towel, no chow."
They waited. When they were too tired they went to sleep, but when they woke they felt starved. Until Chu couldn't hold out any longer and begged her brother, "Let's do it." That was the two youngsters' maiden intercourse. Immediately, the father tore the bunk beds apart and put them side by side, saying to them,
"From now on, you two sleep together. Ever heard of the term child bride? You are in fact a child bridegroom. If it were the old society, Chinese refer the time before 1949 as the old society, you would already be husband and wife. It's a pity in the new society we have to wait until Xiaolin reaches the legal age of 18.
Jiang felt suffocated in such a deformed family relationship, and gradually he became abnormal himself. Every time he touched the body of Xiaolin, to him his sister, he felt a strong loathing and guilt, while Chu, a girl in her bloom on the other hand, was gradually getting familiar and accustomed to Jiang's body. That aroused her sexual desire greatly. The situation developed to the stage that Chu initiatively asked Jiang for lovemaking. That made the days and nights longer and longer for him. If it were not for the loving and caring of the family in his childhood, he would probably have fled in the very beginning. Fortunately, the time to be away from the family finally came when he had to go to the countryside as one of the millions of educated youth. At the countryside, Jiang avoided being with any women, therefore no need to mention he had no girlfriend. However, he somehow got quite close with a barefoot doctor, self-trained local doctor with no or very little academic education, called Small White Face, and the two intimate male friends later became sex partners. Jiang's foster father, also his supposed father-in-law, heard that his adopted son and son-in-law was mashing with someone else, a man. He stamped with fury and immediately ran to the countryside to get Jiang back. That was exactly the time Jiang started to realize the countryside was not exactly as Chairman Mao had said, great achievements can be made. On the contrary, to him it seemed no achievements could be made out there. So, he pushed his boat along with his father's current and returned back to the city. The father used all his brains, means, and everything in his power to lock Jiang in his pocket. At last, through all kinds of relationships, he managed to get Jiang a temporary job as a railway switchman, an ideal job in which Jiang couldn't go anywhere, only walk between the rail switcher and his little wooden hut. Unexpectedly, Jiang fell in love with my violin playing and gradually moved his affection from the violin to the boy who plays the violin. When Chu became aware of this, although partly for her natural needs, fundamentally she wanted to rescue her brother, or her husband-to-be, whoever, and get him out of the deviance and homosexuality. Hence, she started to visit Jiang more and more often. I just don't want to imagine how dreadful it must have been for Jiang to do things he didn't like with his sister each time she visited. Hearing the story, I had no words to say. Being a 14-year-old, these matters surpassed my comprehension. Seeing I was affected by her story, she brought out the real business.
My brother Jiang is getting more and more crazy because he is unable to listen to your violin or see you. If things go on like this, something awful could happen. I've been talking to him, and he's pledged and gives you his words that he will never ever touch you again. Please go see him from time to time, as a friend, a good friend, just like before. About his abnormal sexuality, I'll do whatever is needed, trust me.
In finishing, she exhorted.
As it says, don't wash your dirty linen in public.
In Chinese, the disgrace of a family should never be spread, so promise me you'll keep it all to yourself and never tell anyone else.
I swear to Chairman Mao I wouldn't.
I didn't finish the sentence, therefore I don't remember if I meant, I wouldn't tell anyone else or, I wouldn't keep it all to myself. But even after all that, I still dared not go see Jiang Langsha as the memory of the back pain was truly stubborn. Nevertheless, I, a boy at the age of puberty, felt panic about my growing sexual desire. More and more frequently I hid myself under my quilt playing, with pain. My quilt started to look like a map, and every time after, washing it and letting it dry, the map on my quilt gradually growing bigger and bigger. Although I no longer saw Jiang, I quite often met Chu, for only one reason, to borrow books. Through Xiaolin I got to know that there was a wooden box filled with books under Jiang's bed, the complete and only inheritance from his real father. That's why Jiang regarded the books as precious as his own life.
Jian's brother had always been very nice and kind to me, but he never let me touch his books. Yet he is willing to lend books to you. That's an obvious sign of your importance in his heart.
Chu said with a little flavor of jealousy. Chu Ziolin's words made me feel very heavy. Hence, I decided to give up the method of borrowing books from Jiang through Chu. I even thought of making an effort to quit my addiction to reading. But my effort didn't solve the problem. On the contrary, it put Chu in an awkward position. Almost once every 2 days she was at the rail crossing waiting for me to pass by, again and again asking me what was amiss with me. When I was forced to tell the truth, she laughed.
If what you reject is Jian's brother, not books, I may be able to help you both. I mean both my Jian brother's feelings and your reading. You see, my aunt is working at the provincial library. She has had nothing to do for all these years since the Cultural Revolution sealed the library. But recently, the library is thinking of sorting things out and putting them in order before reopening. I was just considering getting a temporary job as my aunt's helper.
Really?
Immediately I got excited.
In fact, besides novels, I'm also in urgent need for violin music scores.
I soon made a list: Kaiser, Kreutzer, Paganini, and many violin concertos such as Bach, Handel, Mozart, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, Tchaikovsky, and so on. Since then, every time I met Chu, she always had a novel and a couple of music scores for me. And each time she handed them over to me, she always emphasized the same thing.
No need to thank me. Thank my Jian brother. If it were not for the sake of his happiness, I would never dare to do things like that. Although it is said that to steal books, one is not considered a thief. On the other hand, who cares about books nowadays? Who has counted how many of them were burned? If you had seen the tons of books piled up there with no one to take care of them, what's the difference from the trash heap?
Chu's words, and more importantly her actions, made me more and more touched by Jiang's sincerity, which sometimes faded my memory of the backhole pain. One day, I bought a 20 RMB mahua, Chinese snack, planning to place it outside Jiang's little hut entrance, not to show my forgiveness, but to express my appreciation. Still a good distance from his door, I heard their quarrel.
What's wrong with you today?
Chu's voice.
Not today, it was wrong from the very beginning.
Jiang's voice. Chu.
What? You're saying you didn't like me from the very beginning?
Jiang.
It's not that I don't like you, it's that I don't like to do those kinds of things with you.
Chu.
Don't like to do with me, equals don't like me?
Jiang.
I don't like you, I love you. Let me say it again, I love you, very much, because you are my baby sister, my only sister in the whole world. So listen to me carefully. To like you but dislike doing things with you are two separate issues, totally.
Chu.
You mean you are not going to do it with me anymore?
Jiang.
If it's possible.
Chu.
Not even after we get married?
Jiang.
Oh, you still don't get it. Do I have to make it so clear to you, my silly, that I would never get married, not to you, not to anybody?
Chu.
Why?
Jiang.
Because sexually I don't like women overall, not at all.
Chu's weeping. Jiang's comforting. Chu.
I know your heart is occupied with that little 9 brother. But he is a man, in fact not really a man yet but just a boy. He scares you to death. I beg you, never harm him again.
Jiang. I know. What I did was disgraceful, as you said he is just a boy. But what you don't know is he is also a man with a great future. That's why I wish to push him a bit with my meager strength, not to redeem my name from wrong done, but for his gift. Now you understand why I asked you to get close to him? I hoped that you could substitute for me and do things for him. If possible, satisfy all his demands, with all that you can give. You know what I mean? If you really love me, you should do as I wish.
Hearing that, I ran away like a madman and forgot to leave the bag of mahua I purposely bought for him outside the entrance. A few days later, Chu Xiaolin blocked me on my way to see Teacher Li. She said she would show me something to make me very happy. Following her, we arrived at building ruins burned during the gunfighting at the beginning of the Cultural Revolution. I was led to a room with some loose building materials scattered here and there. Chu pulled out a sack and opened it. Thus some books and music scores flopped down on the ground. Oh, my God! Besides a small portion of novels, it's a whole sack of music scores, not only violin music scores, but also other scores such as piano pieces, operas, symphonies, and works for voice, etc.
Loaded a whole bag for you. Should be enough for a while,
she said.
What's wrong? I mean, what's right? Why?
I didn't know where to start.
Why? Because I'm afraid I might not be able to help you with books anymore.
I was too excited by the sight of the books to listen to what she was really saying. Meanwhile, footsteps broke the joyous atmosphere. She comforted me.
Don't worry, it's Uncle Feng, my acquaintance.
The man called Uncle Feng appeared in front of me. He was a tall, strong man in his 50s with longer eyebrows than normal. Chu introduced us to each other. I politely bowed to him, but he returned little response. Chu finally said to me,
Take whatever you need now and leave the rest here. Whenever you need more, you can always come here to get them. It's absolutely safe here as no one else knows it but me.
Walking out of the building ruins, Chu told me that she got to know Uncle Feng many years ago when she was a little girl. Every time her father beat her, Feng's place was her shelter in which to hide. Feng was a foreman working for Changsha Construction Company. He lost his wife a long time ago and had no children. Since then he had no fixed home, but lived wherever he worked. Chu repeatedly stressed that though Feng looked crass and uneducated in appearance, inside he was a very good-hearted and kind person.
I have already told Uncle Feng that you are my best friend. From now on, if you are cornered, you don't have to see my Jian brother but turn to him for help instead.
She added. When we reached a road crossing, a place where we were supposed to say goodbye to each other, she suddenly asked me whether I would like to eat a bowl of noodle with her. Seeing me subconsciously searching my pocket, she comforted me.
Don't worry, today it's on me.
I was relieved.
Next time.
Okay, if there is a next time.
She smiled, bitterly. I ordered a bowl of shredded pork noodle. She said she couldn't taste it and so asked for a bowl of sour and spicy noodle. But as the two bowls of noodle were being placed on the table, she said she had little appetite, and only took a couple of spoons of soup, then pushed the bowl in front of me. I kept my nose straight to the noodles. Watching me gorge, she turned her face away from me and silently wept. She waited until I finished my last string of noodle and then stood and handed over 1 big yuan RMB, 2 bowls cost 50 fan only, and said, "Keep the change." Before the noodle man thanked her, she uttered,
It's truly tiresome to be alive.
What?
I didn't get it. She explained to me and to herself too.
I wish to leave this place and go somewhere else for good, to find another way of existence, in another world.
I see.
I still had not the slightest idea what she was talking about.
No matter what happens, promise me not to see my Jian brother again.
She suddenly looked at me, very seriously. We said goodbye to each other, just like that. And that was our farewell. When Chu Xiaolin returned home, before she even entered the door, her father was waiting for her with a chicken feather rod in his hand. Chicken feather rod is a Chinese dust cleaner, but is commonly exploited as a means of beating children in order to prevent the hands of the parents from getting hurt. This time she didn't evade but walked straight to the chicken feather rod. The father lashed her with the pitiless rod as he bawled out,
You stole things from the library, you thief! I'll kill you, good-for-nothing dead devil.
The mother saw the father was being too excessive and rolled her wheelchair in between the two to defend her daughter, the only daughter. The father said to the mother,
Get out of my way! You know the old saying, spare the rod, spoil the child.
The mother made no move. Instead she questioned her daughter very indignantly.
How could you do such a thing to disgrace the good name of our working-class family, and for whom was it worth taking books from the library? Today your uncle brought a group of people from the Peacekeeper Command Center here.
She did not wait for her mother to finish. Chu admitted,
For the sake of my Jian brother, I would do anything. For the sake of someone my Jian brother likes, I also can do anything.
The father.
You are not my daughter, our family has no such gene, you, go die.
Chu replied,
All right, I know why you hate me. You wanted a boy. That's why you asked Mom to have an abortion to kill me when the doctor said I was to be a girl. Now you have made it so clear you still don't want me to be your daughter after so many years, and my Jian brother doesn't want me to be his wife. Who wants me in this world? My sky.
My sky is a Chinese calling for God, next to Chairman Mao.
What's the point of living?
Chu poured out her tears, together with all that she had wanted to spit out for a long time. The mother had a hunch that something wrong was going on. She queried,
What do you mean that your Jian brother doesn't want you to be his wife? Speak more clearly, will you?
Jian brother said he would never marry me.
Chu Xiaolin sobbed her heart out. That certainly shocked the parents. The mother tried to comfort her daughter as well as herself and the husband.
I'm sure he was just kidding you. Jiang's son is not that kind of ungrateful boy.
The father shouted with fury.
I knew. I knew. I knew it a long time ago. Jian's son is not a good thing, you too, bad stuff. Look, who put your mother in a wheelchair? Ha! You, it was you, little devil. I wish you were all dead. Oh my sky. What a mistake I've made.
Chu suddenly stopped crying. She bit her lips to control her sobbing, looked at her father fearlessly and very calmly said,
You so much regret your mistake. I'm glad to help you in correcting it. Today, right now, in front of you.
Hey, how dare you try to scare me? You die, you die.
The father again raised his chicken feather rod.
If you don't die today, I will have to kill you.
Chu walked to the basin stand. Facing the mirror she combed her hair, put a flower in her hair and took a moment to have a good look at herself, then walked into her room to fetch her photo album and walked to the window. She started tearing photographs piece by piece, throwing the small pieces of her photos out the window. After she watched the last piece wave down from the 4th floor to the ground, Chu Xiaolin climbed up to the window. The mother couldn't take any more. She yelled to her daughter.
No, no.
Don't buy her bluff, I'm sure she dare not.
She had heard enough, so did not wait for her father to finish his words. She opened the dove cage by the window. The doves, poo-poo, rushed out toward freedom. Chu Xiaolin took a look at the sky, then shut her eyes, took her last breath, deeply, and launched her wings, with the doves. She flew freely into an infinite time and space. The father fell, flop, down onto a chair, while the mother stood up from her wheelchair and struggled towards the window.